Hi everyone, this is Germinal G, founder of GGV Publishing Company, and today we got a special guest, actually a recurring guest, because this is his second book published with GGV Publishing. Christian DeLuca, Christian who published the Last Jinyiwei. It is the first book of the Memories of the Ming. It's a book of fiction. It's a book of historical fiction that also includes a lot of military history, military strategy, and there's a lot of psychology and political science. So the book is fascinating, but we will talk about also Christian himself. And ladies and gentlemen, let me say that Christian won the Best Indie Book Award last year, and he was the finalist for another award. I have to remember the name, but Christian is already accomplished for someone who has been an author officially for more than a year, and it's a great accomplishment. It's a great accomplishment. So, Christian, thank you, and welcome to the GGV Publishing podcast. How you doing?
Thank you, sir. Doing well today.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Christian, congratulations! You won the Best Indie Book Award. How does it feel?
It's pretty awesome. I actually remember the day pretty well. I remember you texted me earlier, like, please
Yeah.
tell me you got this too. And I'm like, oh man, looks like I got snubbed. And then I was later in the day, I was just playing some video games with my friends, and then I get the email. We're in like the middle of a gunfight, and I'm like, oh, I won the award. Let's
There you
go.
go. So, do you remember when you entered the competition? So, first of all, what made you enter the competition? What made you believe that you had a shot at it?
I mean, I just feel like the Little Red Book, my first work published.
So, this book here, ladies and gentlemen, the Little Red Book, again, it's not that little, guys. It's a 520 page book. It's not that little, but it is definitely read. It's about the history of China. And Christian won the Best Indie Book Award for that. And yeah, so Christian, sorry for interrupting. Keep going.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess it was just kind of like any time that you do anything, you kind of want feedback on it. You want to see if it's like as good as you think it is in your head, or maybe you don't think it's that good, but then you're like, hey, let me just try.
Yeah,
So, I think it was a little bit of both. I'm like, oh, like I gotta test myself, and the only way you can test yourself is put your stuff out there. So, um, you recommended the competition to me,
yeah.
and like I did some research on my own, just other stuff too. Um, and I just figured, why not? So I answered the history category and won that. So that was
Awesome.
pretty awesome.
This is great because, and the reason why it is special again, it's because uh, it's your very first attempt. You know, authors usually they don't win awards from their first book. Usually, you got to publish a couple of them. You know, there's some authors like they wrote maybe two or three books in their entire lives, and those books just blew up. Like, let's take for example, The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Right, he
Mhm.
wrote that book, 1,000 pages, blew up, and then he wrote another book called A Theory a Theory of Human Sentiment, something like that, which is also a great book. So these are the only two books he wrote. Um, the reason why I'm fascinated by your author's career so far is because the Little Red Book is your very first book, and again, it's not little. It's you start off spectacularly. You start off with boldness, and I'm going to ask you a question after I'm making my comment, but you started with boldness, and again, right, like most people when they write books, especially the first one, they want to start little by little and then build up. But you decide to publish a 500-page book on a history of the evolution of Chinese culture, Chinese economy, and Chinese political history. And that kind of work demands a lot of research, a lot of dedication, a lot of materials that you got to dig in. I mean, thank God now with the internet, you can do that from your room. Otherwise, I can imagine you going to the lab, like the local
Yeah.
library in your neighborhood, right? It's crazy. and you still decide to enter the book into a literary competition. What was your level of confidence to dare that? Because you have to have a little bit of hubris to do that. So
Yeah.
you're quiet, but you're not that quiet. In my opinion, I think, Christian, that you have that calm yet very strong self-confidence. So I want you to describe to the audience a little bit, especially as a writer, because like I've been watching you on social media and you're perfect in your craft. I'm watching you closely, you're perfect in your craft. It's amazing to see how your how your writing is just getting better and better. As we know, we were working on this book here, The Last Jinyiwei. When it comes to grammatical mistakes, there was like almost nothing. I was like, this
Yeah.
guy knows how to write. And it's amazing. So for for aspiring authors, like, I always talk about, never doubt your abilities. Like if you're good at something, maximize on what you're good at. And I believe writing outside of your professional career, in engineering, writing is your calling, in my opinion. It's something that comes naturally to you. So what was your level of confidence before you won the award, and what is your level of confidence now after winning the award?
So I think that like confidence wise, um, I actually boxed for like 2 or 3 years in college, and that's kind of where a lot of it came from. Um, being able to physically defeat another person is you derive a lot of confidence from that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But there was always like this sort of complex that I had within myself that I didn't really think I was smart or intelligent or anything. Um, I wasn't really good with school. I mean, don't get me wrong, I did well in school, but it was more of hard work rather than just being like, I could ace this test. No,
Yeah,
I was horrible with tests.
say
Um, but when it came to writing a paper or doing a presentation, I always did well with that.
we're the same on
Um,
that one.
so, um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of my time boxing, I had a great coach, and I think a lot of people don't realize that there's just so much stuff that you could just translate from either doing a sport or even, just writing and taking that to doing a sport as well, just vice versa. Um, like if you can do one thing and you could succeed in that one thing, you have sort of the formula. It's going to be different, obviously, because throwing punches at someone is a lot different than holding a pen over some paper. But the grind and the practice, like that all carries over. So my level of confidence to enter the competition was because I practice. I, every day I'm writing. Um, and not for nothing. I know a lot of people, like I see a lot of stuff on social media. People are like, oh, I have writer's block. I don't think I'll ever have writer's block.
Love it. I love it.
I mean,
I love it.
don't get me wrong. There's been days where I'll write something and be like, well, that was the most uh horrible stuff that's ever come out of my mouth, but I just move on. I'll get to it on the second round, fix it. I'll leave a comment. I'm like, this is horrible. Like you should see my notes on my like manuscripts, like when I'm working on them.
Yeah,
It's
and
like
we will definitely talk about your
horrible.
writing process in a bit too, because it's important for aspiring authors to know how you do it. But yeah, keep going.
It's, so, but that's really where it derives from is I read, I write every day. It's just by nature when you do it every day, you're gonna feel naturally more confident about it. Um, even with this nice achievement, nowhere near the level that I think that I could reach. It's an ongoing battle, and I don't think it'll ever end because there's never been one perfect writer. That's what's interesting about this field is, you have people who have best-selling books, and sometimes they might not be too good. So like there's a lot of that. There's like backing in that sense, marketing. That's one of the parts that I could really improve on.
Yeah,
That's the tough part. I don't really like so much this doing the social media, but
yeah.
it's the nature of the beast
Yeah,
today. So
it is the nature of the industry indeed. And I think I even told one author about it after sending the sales report. They're asking like, like how can I improve? I say honestly, and I'm using my own experience here. When I published my very first book titled American Political Culture: An Observation from the Outside, I thought that the book sold okay, but I thought that it would sell, sell, and sell, and sell. I was like a novice into that in 2018. And what I realized was that people buy your product because a book is a product at the end of the day. People buy
Mhm.
your product because they know you.
Yeah.
It's not because of the product itself. The product itself, it's more of a bonus. But for example, we both use iPhone, we both use an Apple product because we love Apple, right?
Mhm.
It's like once you have the iPhone, you're gonna buy the Mac or the MacBook Air, or you're gonna buy the Apple Watch, and basically, it's because of the company that produce it. So it's the same with a book. The more people familiarize themselves with the author who wrote the book, whenever that author release a book, no matter what it is, it's usually going to sell. That's a secret. That's what I learned. And since then, that's how I realized that I didn't even have to promote my books that much on social media to sell. Because when you promote a book on social media, if you post it every day, the first week it's good, but marginal utility it decreases. Like the people say, you put that on their face all the time. They're like, dude, I'm sick of it. So
Yeah.
you have to wait like it's true. You have to wait like maybe 48 to 72 hours, and then post it again, and then people says, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna come back on it." But once people know who you are, it doesn't matter. They're like, okay, we know Christian DeLuca. We're gonna go buy his book because it's Christian. So that's what it is. So like, even your future books that you will be releasing, they will sell because people know who you are.
Mhm.
So it's and that's, as you say, like that is definitely the aspect where you're gonna have to put in more work. You're gonna have to be more than just an author. You also have to sell yourself if you want, people to access your writings and value what you because the thing you're writing is for them. It's not just for you. If it's for you, there's no way to publish the book. There's no reason to
Right.
publish it. You just keep it in your computer. But if you publish a book, it's because you want people to read what you have to say. And if you want them to read what you have to say, they got to know who you are. So that being said, how do you feel after winning the award?
Uh, I feel great, but I've always been this way throughout my whole entire life. Any achievements, I'm like, okay, come on, let's go. Move on.
Love it, love
Yeah.
it, love it.
I don't, and that's also how I am with failures too.
Yeah,
Whenever something bad happens or like I mess something up, I'm just like, okay, learn, move on. Let's go.
move on. Yeah,
I
and
I'm like I think I'm like a shark. If I stop moving, I would just die.
yeah, no, it's it shows that you have great resilience. To be honest, it shows that you
Hmm.
have great resilience, and your process reminds me of Robert Greene. He wrote a book called Mastery, and to me, it's one of the greatest books to read after the 48 Laws of Power. And because I think I made a post on Instagram once, I said there are two ways to get confidence. Either you're charismatic, but usually charisma comes more from a deprivation of love. You were a kid, one of your parents, you had like a tough relationship with him or her, and you do something, your parents kind of like bring you down, it's never enough. So it kind of like fuels you to your drive to succeed, and that's how you develop charisma. Then you become more bold. But this is something that not everyone. And there are some people they have like a tough childhood and they're still not charismatic. So when you're not charismatic as a way to build your confidence, the other way is to master your craft. And because it's not everyone who can walk into a room and brighten the room. So when you don't have that ability, your other ability is your craft. So you figure out that you're good at something. Let me be the best at it. And
Mhm.
you write every day. So and what is interesting with people who write every day is that it's very hard to argue with someone who writes every day. It is very hard to argue with someone who writes every day. And that is one thing that people don't really notice or like they don't really understand because someone, especially if you write like nonfiction, for
Mhm.
example, I cannot argue with you in depth about Chinese history.
Yeah.
That's your craft, man.
Yeah.
If I try to argue with you over this, you're gonna crush me because this is what you do for a living. Even yes, The Last Jinyiwei, sure, it's a book of fiction, but there's a lot of research in it. The proof, like at the end of the book, there is references. So that says a lot. Like you actually put in the work. It's not just a scenario that you created and that's it. It's based on some real facts, like the stuff that are factual about Chinese history. So you're becoming an expert when it comes to Chinese history. So right, and you write every day. So imagine someone like me. Oh yeah, Christian, like, let's debate about Chinese history. Like, what am I going to say? So, what are your plans for in your writing journey in the next 12 to the next 12 to 24 months?
Um, well, I have another manuscript that's pretty close to being done. It's on the second draft right now. That's it's going quite slowly, but it's just really taking my time on it. I think when I finished it, the first draft, it was 70,000 words, and now it's 103. So it's
I
getting
love it.
bigger. It's getting bigger instead of smaller, which normally that's how that works. Um, I'm gonna definitely take my time with this because I think it's really important to me that the story that I'm gonna tell here is well executed and well thought out because I think it's interesting. I don't want to talk too much about it, but
Sure.
it's
Yeah, plus we still have to talk about the book. But before I dive in into the book, I have one last question about like writing in general. Then we'll come back to writing again. But and I believe that your answer will certainly be biased because you have not experienced the other side yet. But in your opinion, do you think it is better to be a best-selling author or an award-winning author?
um I think I think award winning is definitely the more valid because you have critics and judges that look at this. They are experts in these supposed fields too. Um, Obviously, my approach with the Little Red Book was also to write a more accessible um, account of Chinese history so that the average American could read it and be like, ah, okay. Um, so maybe I could have did that a little better, but to have it recognized by critics is that's a good win. Again, it's just something to learn from, but um, there's a medium to be had, of course. Like you want your book to be appreciated by the general public. Maybe not so much for the monetary value, but more for the value of knowledge that they get from it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is for me.
Yeah.
Um, but again, to be an award-winning, the people will come back to those and be like, oh, okay, I see. I see why this won. This he was on it, you know?
No, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with you because it's personally I would rather be because you and I were intellectuals at the end of the day. Like, I mean, it's true, we engage into because writing, even if you write fiction, it still requires intellect. Like it's true, writing is a creative field, but it is hard, man. Like writing is actually hard. That now I think like you and I we may not see like that because we do it for a living technically. Like we
Mhm.
just do it. It comes naturally to us. But to sit and to actually put your thoughts into writing, it's challenging. The average person is struggling to do that. I mean, you and I we do that like even eyes closed, like once we started, it's done. Like, that's why you even say you don't have writer's block. Personally, like I stopped having writer's block. I used to have them, but now, like, I mean, I do that for a living, man. So it's it just comes naturally. I have my novel that will be published too. I have to start working on the promotion eventually. Yeah, it's a I mean, you're the first to know, like, it's a novel that is written more as a biography. It's more of a biography than an actual dialogue, because I read a lot of biographies, so it makes sense to it's just like the biography of a fictional character. So, but I will talk more about it in another time. But yeah, like writing is really challenging, and when it comes to being among the 1%, who to whom writing is like a piece of cake. Like, I'm proud to be part of that. Like,
Yeah.
it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling. So, Christian, now let's talk about the Last Jinyiwei. So, why this title? What inspired you to write that book in the first place?
So when I was researching for the Little Red Book, there were, I would say the majority of Chinese dynasties I actually didn't know too much about until like when I went into that book. Um, so I only really knew most about the Han Dynasty, which, mostly came from like my childhood and playing video games, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Dynasty Warriors, which the new one just came out last week, so I'm very excited for that. And so I knew most about that, and that was only an isolated 50 years of history, maybe like a little longer if you want to extend it, but um so the Little Red Book was a massive undertaking where I tried to take all of Chinese history, all the major dynasties, and kind of explain it and show what things that the modern China does today that they did back then too. So when I actually got to the Ming Dynasty, I was pretty fascinated, especially with the end of the Ming Dynasty. It was quite chaotic, and it reminded me a lot of the Three Kingdoms period. And once again, I always say that Chinese history is just a Game of Thrones season every time, every dynasty. It's dramatic. There's crazy stories, legends, heroic feats, um, villains. It's all there, and the way that their history is written is it almost is kind of like a work of fiction in a way, but no, it's all true, which is crazy. Um, so the Ming Dynasty, um, they had this organization called the Jinyue, which is, depending on how you translate it, it's the brocade brocade uniform guard, and they wore these beautiful pieces of clothing, but they were the shadiest people. They were, I guess you could liken them to like the Gestapo or
I was
something.
about to say it's more
They
like a secret, like a political police,
Yeah.
sort of.
So they had so much power. They could say that this person committed a crime, even though this guy was like literally not even in the city. They would just say, "Hey, he committed a crime this day, this time. Take him away. Let's kill him."
Wow.
Just out of convenience.
Wow.
If he was a
Just because they can.
yes. So, I found them very interesting. And then, but I moved on. And then when I was at the time, I was actually rewatching Avatar: The Last Airbender with my girlfriend. She never saw it before. And I was watching season two, and I'm like, oh, for those of people who have seen it, like the Dai Li kind of reminds me a lot of the Jin Yue. A lot like an aesthetic and the way that the Earth Kingdom was illustrated. It kind of looked like Ming Dynasty China. Um, and then I looked it up. I'm like, oh, let me see. According to the Avatar wiki, it says that there was a inspiration there from the Jinyue. So um, then I'm like, all right, cool. So now my strategy from the Little Red Book was, all right, I made an accessible like nonfiction work for Chinese history. Now let me try to do a fiction where I could entertain people with the story first, and then just as a byproduct, they learn about the history. So that was kind of my strategy with the Last Jinyiwei. And the title is because there is the main character, Liang Shi. He joins the Jinyiwei to try to stop his nation from falling. Um, so there's a lot of commentary about the human condition and resilience, like in that respect,
Can you talk
patriotism and everything.
can you talk a little bit about the main character himself? So his personality
Hmm.
and how, because what is interesting about the main character is that his personality is contradictory to the philosophy of the Jinyu. So
Right.
that's what makes, so it's that contradiction that makes the whole book interesting. So how does he survive when he knows that he's pretty much compelled to compromise his values, like his personal values, against the philosophy, the values of the political police.
It's very tough for him, and he goes through a lot of inner turmoil throughout the novel. Um, Obviously, the novel as it's written is him writing it as an older man, recalling his times. So that's why the subtitle Memories of the Ming. Um, he to describe his personality, I always say that like if a golden retriever was a person, it would kind of be him. Kind of naive, very wholesome, naive in probably the best sense of the way, just really idealistic, um, and just wants so hard to believe that he could be the change for this dynasty.
Basically, he means well.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, Obviously, some shady stuff goes on, and that causes him to question a little bit about the organization and, his position in the Ming Dynasty. Um, but I could still say that his love for his country and the people is above all else. So, like, he is kind of willing to do what's necessary. He does struggle with some of the stuff, but there's just a lot of inner turmoil within him. Um, but then there's also the way he interacts with the two other main characters, and that brings like another level to this as well.
Can you talk a little bit about the antagonists as well? In the like, how are they compared to the main character, compared to the protagonist, like the antagonist? Because in every story, there's always the protagonist and the antagonist. So can you elaborate a little bit about them, like their personality, their moral philosophy, like what makes them stand out, even in the evil side of the spectrum?
Mhm. So the antagonist in the book is actually interesting because depending on the way you read it, you could kind of think that there's a bunch of different antagonists. Um, you could say that, hey, maybe the leader, the Jinyu is the antagonist. Maybe you could say a scheming politician is the antagonist. Maybe you could even say the emperor is the antagonist, or you could say the foreign invaders are an antagonist. There's a whole bunch of different forces that are going on, and I kind of did that purposely because in that time when there was that much chaos, you didn't really know who was an ally and who was a friend. People sometimes to your face, they'd be like, yes, we are going to help you, da 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 da. And then they stab you in the back. So there's a lot of that. And I think the commonality is that the antagonists are very good at hiding their intentions, whereas Liang Shi wears his heart on his sleeve. So the two opposing forces there are just they really go head to head, and Liang Shi is kind of gets taken advantage of in that respect.
Interesting. And why did you choose that time period in history, the 1600s? What does it mean to you? why you didn't choose, let's say, the 18 or the 19 or the 1900, like the 20th century? Why you chose the 17th century to start with?
Easy answer. When I was just researching it, I liked the time period. It was cool. I
Yeah.
like I like the historical characters and everything. But on a deeper and more professional level, the in the 1600s, you now have like the more of like the firearm technology coming into play. And I know like Shogun was a big hit recently. That was 1600s Japan. And you saw kind of how firearms affected that conflict. Um, you know, honor and swords don't really do much against the cannon. So it's that weird time where military technology was improving so much and at a rapid rate where it really made certain groups be able to have a better chance at overthrowing a dynasty. So like Li Zicheng, he was a peasant rebel and he led this grand force and being able to have the access to firearms helped level the playing field because obviously the peasants in China were the majority.
Mhm.
So he always had numbers in that respect, but now they also had firearms and everything. But the curious thing is the Manchus from the north, the nomadic people, for the most part, in the beginning at least, they kind of stuck to the traditional methods, just bow and arrow, swords, crossbow. And it was kind of interesting that they were able to kind of have their way with the Ming in the north, despite the Ming having a bunch of technology. And now, where did that technology come from? Europeans started to come to China like during that time, or at least the Jesuit missions during that period were very influential. Um, and that was actually like a little bit of the story in Shogun too. There was Jesuit missionaries there. You'll remember like a couple characters if you saw the show. So there are a couple Jesuits in the Last Jinyiwei. Um, and being able to have like that European character come to a completely foreign society and kind of be like a well-respected person is interesting. So just to perfectly answer your question is just there was so much going on. The Ming Dynasty was very cosmopolitan at its end. There was a lot of technology, and then the influx of European missionaries who were also like, they wanted to spread their religion, but they also wanted to, kind of make a little political games too. So it was just perfect chaos, really.
Yeah.
That's what made the era so exciting to me.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about the book cover. It is phenomenal to start with, and I hope you're pleased with the book cover. But can you describe a little bit um, the meaning behind it? So we see a soldier, I assume it's the main character here, standing in front of a temple, and there is a fire going on. So, what is the message you're trying to convey behind that book cover?
So first things first, I gotta give a shout out to my artist, Wei Chang,
Yeah, it is well done.
from Wei Chen Studios. Totally just reached out to him. Out of the blue and he got back to me very responsive. Never he totally understood what I wanted. It was awesome. He just completely knocked it out of the park. And I told him like I said I was gonna send him a book and I'm just waiting until after Chinese New Year now because he's visiting family. And I said to him like if this book sells like to the random person, they're gonna buy it because of the cover. They're gonna be
That's
like,
a great cover.
wow. And literally every person I show it to, they're like, oh my gosh, it's awesome. So I definitely I have to fanboy over it myself.
Yeah.
Um, But as for the message, yes, it is Liang Shuyi looking down at the Forbidden City in flames. The Forbidden City was where the Emperor lived and governed from. So it's it happens towards the end of the book that this kind of scene occurs. Um, it's just kind of it's interesting. It's like Liang Shiri, the Forbidden City was like this the epitome of the Ming. Structurally, buildings could have a lot of symbolic meaning, and nothing more than the Forbidden City. I'm reminded of the film The Last Emperor, which was the story of Puyi, the last emperor of China. And at the end, you see the throne at the end of the movie, and you're just like, wow, that is so amazing. Like that this guy practically ruled over the world in his pocket of the world. And there's just something so powerful with seeing a throne like that and seeing the building that it's within. Um, in many ways, it's to show that his dreams and his goals failed in a way. He was not able to save um, the Ming by himself. And that's not really a spoiler because like you could literally just go on Wikipedia and be like, yeah, the Ming got one. If I was writing an alternate history, then I'd be like, all right,
Yeah.
yeah, my boy Leon Sure, he defeated everybody.
And
But
how long it took you to write this book? Excuse me. And what was your approach like? What was your writing strategy to write this book?
so it was definitely a little bit more difficult in the beginning because I'm like, oh, okay, there's like more dialogue. I gotta do more dialogue. I have to think. Um, with like a nonfiction, if you do the research, like just pretty much everything will make sense
Yeah.
structurally. With this, I had to like go back. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm recalling something that happened that I wrote like 3 months ago. I have to make sure that it aligns and it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then like when I go about doing the second draft, I'm like, all right, cool. Let's like add a little bit of foreshadowing now because now I know what's going to happen. And people are kind of surprised when I tell them this, but when I actually wrote this, I didn't really have much of a structure. It
Interesting.
was I was kind of just I almost just kind of let the characters live out the time.
But did you develop like an outline of like chapter one or like I know for fiction we don't really see
Yeah.
chapters, but like chapter one was going to talk about this, chapter two, chapter three, and so on and so forth. Did you develop like an outline or you just went completely with the flow?
So I had an outline, um, and I could tell you with 100% certainty that only the beginning was the same. Um, it actually pretty fun. The one character, He,
Mhm.
he he was supposed to be the main character. And in many ways, if you actually read the book, you could kind of see that. And I still left that deliberately.
Mm.
Um, but it's yeah, so like he was supposed to be the main character, and then introducing Leon Yi was like a kind of a last minute thing. Like the day before I started work, I'm like, hey, let me make this other guy. Like let me tell the story through his eyes. And very much so, Hefei is an integral part to the story. So like I always enjoyed consuming media where the main character is the narrator, but like he's not actually the main character. So very much so, Leon Shui is central to the plot. Don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. Everything's told from his point of view.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also very much about He Fei as well, and Wang Yong as well. Um, I'm sorry, I think I forgot your question. What
You
you got?
just I was asking what was your writing strategy for the book and how long it took you to complete the project and yeah.
Yeah. So the writing strategy was I was actually intending to once again try to squeeze a bunch of history into one book. And so I actually wrote the story complete. So like I already know the ending of the last book.
Okay.
It's just a matter of when I was writing these periods after the Ming fell, it was very rushed, and I'm like, all right, I need to just let's cut it, put more depth into the first part. Then I could put more depth into the second and third, and I don't think it'll need a fourth, but maybe. Um, so there was that because I just wanted to tell the whole story of the Ming Qing transition. So as the Ming transitioned into the Qing dynasty, um, I wanted to tell that whole story and tell that from the view of a soldier. And how long it took me, mm, I think I want to say like maybe 9 or 10 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And were you like writing every day or not necessarily?
Yeah, so I wrote every day. Um, I at my job I have an hour lunch, so I literally write for like 45 minutes in between. Yeah.
So that means that at work, your mind is more into your.
So don't get me wrong, I could switch it on and off.
Oh no, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah,
But it's just fascinating how uh, I admire how committed you are to the craft. It's really admirable. Like to the point where like the you have an hour break and you instead of like chilling, listen to music, you're like, that's my time to it's admirable, honestly. Like I don't even have the words. Like it's not everyone who does that. Like it shows how involved, how committed you are to the project, how passionate you are about it. And and that's what makes a great writer. Like
mhm,
you do it for the love of the craft.
yeah.
And any aspiring author who's watching this episode should learn from you, honestly. Like to take your freaking lunch, the time to actually write for 45 minutes, it's commendable, man. And honestly, even me, I wouldn't do that. Like I would probably wait until like, I'm at home, everything is relaxed so I can write. But that shows how like the wheels were turning and how like you were thinking about the plot, how you were developing the plot during work time, and and I mean and you produce something fantastic. It's the fact that it took you 10 months shows how challenging it was. Did you read any book of fiction prior to that in order to learn write how to write in a dialogue style, or like you just went in it?
Um, I was reading like a little bit more fiction at the time, just to, I mean, it was never for research purposes. It was just because I wanted to read the book.
Okay.
Um, but I didn't read anything like Chinese or like the popular genres like wuxia. I didn't read any of that. I actually just read like some science fiction books. Genocidal Oregon and The Legend of the Galactic Heroes saga is like two that I really enjoy. Um, so like reading those, I kind of got a feel for like the dialogue.
Yeah.
Um, I thought like the dialogue actually came pretty easy. It was just kind of mixing in like the narrator's thoughts into the situation too.
That's where I'm struggling. Like I've always wanted to write fiction. I told my sister about my fiction projects and writing the book in a dialectical fashion, right? So in a dialogue style. It's something I always struggled with. But I read biographies a lot. Even right now, I'm reading this biography of Ludwig von Mises. It's like 1,100 pages. But it's the reason why I, for example, decided to write my novel in a biographical fashion rather than a dialectical fashion is because it's more descriptive. And yes, there is some dialogues. Even I finished reading the book of Kissinger not too long ago. And in the book of Kissinger, for example, there's a lot of dialogues, like, but it's not, in the dialogues, I like you always go back to the next line. It's more like what, let's say, Nixon said, and then Kissinger retort to what Nixon said, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Like Nick or Kissinger meeting with Leonid Brezhnev, the former Soviet
Yep.
premier, and or meet with Mao or stuff like that. And and so that's to me like writing fiction in a biographical style is easier for me because I read a lot of biographies, and the fiction that I'm writing is it's a political biography of a fictional character.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's I think you're gonna like it. He's the main character is the complete antithesis of the character of the of the Last Jinyiwei. Yeah, it's just an evil man. He's an evil guy.
Hey, that's interesting that you have it. It's I feel like it's not often that the protagonist is like evil.
Oh yeah,
And
like
I've actually like just been seeing like some edits like online for one of like the Chinese manhwas, their comics.
yeah,
And they like the one protagonist of this one is just like literally the most vile human being. And I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
whoa. I'm like, oh, so he's the like I was reading, I'm like, oh, so he's the villain. I'm like, wait, but he's also the protagonist?
yeah,
Oh, cool.
yeah. That's exactly the what my novel is. So it's basically like House of Cards, but
Hmm.
deeper. It's the typical arc. The rise and fall. So the first volume, which will be published in a few weeks, it's called The Rise of the Autocrat. So the name of the book, you have the honor to know before anyone else. It's called The Rule of the Old Dominion.
Hmm.
So Old Dominion is another name for the state of Virginia. So it's about Virginian politics. So so this character, who is a black lawyer and politician, uh, he basically turned Virginia into a authoritarian political regime. It's not really a dictatorship per se, because the democratic process is still there, but there's a
Hmm.
lot of corruption. Like, he has his people in the judiciary. He has like he has one of his mentor became the governor, and he has one of his guys in the Senate. So, like, making sure that he wants to pass a law, instead of arbitrarily just implement a law like that, he goes through the democratic process, but it's his goons in power implementing the thing. And so yeah, so in the book, like, I talk a lot about like his personality, how the guy's a womanizer. But he used women to political ends, and how he
Hmm.
manipulates people. See, so he's a very Machiavellian, very manipulative, conniving man, and he doesn't kill people, but he's the type of dude that will alienate you completely. Like, let's say, for example, you and the guy run for office together, right? You guys want to become, I don't know, state senator. you know, the democratic process suggests that, you campaign, he campaigns, and the best wins. You guys go debate your ideas and stuff like that. But the guy will say, I will take you out, Christian. I don't have time to debate you. I don't want an opponent. So
Oh.
he will dig dirt on you and literally use that against you. If he can find dirt, he will create a plot. He will find your weakness, and he will like use that against you to completely oust you from the race. And that's how we
Hmm.
did with like his two opponents to become a senator. But anyways, I digress. The point is that yeah, so the book, it's I will say more about it in a few weeks, but yeah, it's written in a biographical fashion, and it's completely different than the Last Jinyiwei in terms of like the style and even the characters too. I always think that sometimes the evil guy should get a spotlight, something, once in a while.
Yeah.
Uh, it's more realistic. It's more realistic, and yeah. And so my other question is, when do you plan on releasing book two of the Last Genie? It wouldn't be the Last Genie way this time. It's still
Yeah.
the memories of the main, but the title will be different. So what would be the title?
Um, I the working title right now is The Two Princes.
Interesting.
I won't explain that at all. But
I want to,
um
do you want to spill a little bit?
no, no. But it's yeah, so it's gonna take place after the Ming proper falls. And the Ming does still survive, but they moved down south to Nanjing.
Okay.
And they try to mount a counterattack from there. They try to get back land. So you see, the Jinyiwei as the organization is dead by then, but Liang Shiyi and a couple other characters are still able to travel there and still aid in the war effort. But there's going to be even more conflict there. So, uh, when for the time period, I don't really know. Um, there's certainly a lot of different like ideas that I have that I kind of want to work on. I will definitely get to it, especially because of the fact that I was kind of halfway done anyway with the second book. I gave it like I beefed it up a little bit more, gave it a little bit more detail. Um, so when I'm done with this current project, I'll kind of see where it's at and then I'll make the judgment because if it's really only half left and I could finish it, then I'll do that. Um, but maybe then if it's not, I'm like, all right, let's just kind of let it simmer for a little bit and then I'll do another like shorter work.
And when it comes to the last Jinyiwei, are you planning on introducing the book into any writing competition? I mean, at this point, you introduce a little red book. You can back off. You gotta, you gotta go for higher. I would say for higher challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to um enter it into a couple competitions. I haven't given that too much thought yet, but I've just been solely focused on finishing this work because I feel like it's taken me a little too long. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to just wrap this one up. Um, but also take my time. I'm a hypocrite, I know. But
Right.
but yeah, I definitely want to see now how my fiction holds up with other because I think in the general writing sphere, fiction is a more hotly contested environment.
Yeah.
With nonfiction, you could fill your little pocket of like your little niche of knowledge, which I think the Little Red Book did. So it had that going for it. Whereas this now could be up against some pretty well written like wuxia novels and like written by new authors. So I definitely am up for the challenge, but it's definitely going to be a much more difficult, I think, to have this one win.
Yeah.
But I remain hopeful.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I think it's possible. And my question was like, do you have any major competition in mind? Like, I don't know, the National Book Award, something like that, the Pulitzer Prize. I know those ones, the big, and they focus more on American context. But I don't know if there is any book competition similar to those that you were planning on introducing uh, you were planning on entering the last Jinyiwei. Okay.
No, I don't have anything in mind right now. I didn't do any research yet.
Okay. And if you could sum up the book in a phrase or two, how would you sum up the last Jinyiwei? What is the moral of the story?
It's it's a story of human resilience, I would say. Um, the way that you think that your world matters so much, but then it could all come crashing down, and you still might be okay after it. That was kind of the main moral of the story of the book, because you have this guy, he's a true patriot for um his government, and it falls, and then he has to see it fall even further, and then just eradicate it. And then the new government that defeated them is the leaders now. He's a subject under them. So it's that human resilience, like, oh, like I thought that the Ming's end would mean my death, but in reality, he goes on and he could still live. So it's human resilience, and I think you get a sense for that. You also get a sense of bitterness too, because as an old man, he's writing this. Um, but still, just the resilience of the that humans are capable of. You see, there's just there's so much unrest in the world and everything, and uh, I'm always impressed by stories of resiliency. Just you go through you go through so much. Death, hardship, and even just on a lesser level, like people just day to day go through their little their little stuff, and just being able to keep going. That's the moral of the story. Just keep going.
Well, I mean, you're a very resilient man, so it makes sense why. It's true. I think, and again, right, I think it's the resilience. If we want to get a little philosophical here, I know you like philosophy too. So, uh, resilience to me is the most important trait to have
Mhm.
in your character because things don't always work as we plan. Yes, we plan because it's better to plan, have a roadmap, right? To know where you're going. You and I are planners. We love to map out the way we do things. We always need structure. Uh, and sometimes you plan for everything and it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, what do you do? Are you gonna sit down and dwell on it and cry because it's not working, or are you gonna man up and keep going?
Mhm.
And that's where resilience kicks in. Like I'm in business, for example. It's hard. You don't know how much you're gonna make next month. You gotta be resilient because the ups and downs, the days, like the month, like you feel like you're on top of the world, and then the month you feel like you're in hell.
Mhm.
The emotional roller coaster of dealing with that is it demands, nerves of steel to sustain that. And if you're not resilient, you'll give up. And
Mhm.
that's why I think that's to me like that's the beauty of the book, as you say, like as you perfectly summed up. That's why I wanted to ask you how you can sum up the book is resilience. It's the most important thing. And I always tell people this like if there is something you need in life, no matter what you do, I always say be the best at what you do. If you find your craft, be the best at it. Be self-disciplined, be confident, be self-disciplined, be consistent, but more importantly, be resilient because there are times you're gonna hit rock bottom. Everyone who succeed in life has reached rock bottom before they became successful. And once you hit rock bottom, that's when your resilience kick in. That's when now you gotta man up and keep going. And I think that's the beautiful lesson that the Last Jinyiwei is conveying uh in the book. Although personally, the main character is too naive, man. He's too idealistic. I have a very uh I have a very pragmatic approach to life. I'm very
Yeah.
pragmatic, very practical. I have trouble with idealism. I it gets under my skin all the time. Like I mean,
He that
okay.
he is meant to be a little bit annoying in some respects. Like I did intentionally make him like you want to punch him through the book. But again, that's him as a young man. He's
Yeah,
idealistic. He's heard all these stories of heroes of old turning stuff around and
yeah,
emerging as the hero, and that's what he wants. He wants to be the hero.
yeah. No, and honestly, like as much as people like him can be annoying, we need them.
Yeah,
We actually need them in society to make the world a better place. Because imagine if everyone is Machiavellian, everyone is Hobbesian.
yeah.
It would be the actual state of nature.
Gotta look over your shoulder all the time.
Right, yeah, literally, like everyone trying to take your property, like,
Yeah.
it's rough. No, it's that's why I say that the book conveys a beautiful lesson at the end of the day, which is human resilience. It's important to stay grounded and to keep going no matter how tough things can be. And that's why I think the Last Jinyiwei it's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece, and we will continue to promote the book so that it will sell. Christian, on your end, promote yourself so that people will also get the book. I mean, that's how it works. But it's definitely a piece of it's definitely a piece of art that will pay off, especially over time. That's the thing with books. Books, for the most part, they're not a hit right away. You give it time, and then suddenly, boom! Like, you're, oh man, I wrote that book like 10 years ago, and that's when now the thing decide to blow up. So it's we have those days. But Christian, can you? We're basically at the end of the of this episode, and can you tell people a little bit about so first of all where they can find you, and if you have any message to convey to aspiring authors when it comes to writing as a craft, because you're an award-winning author now, people look up to you for not just for advice but as an example of leadership in the uh in the field. So yeah.
So you could find me pretty much at Christian DeLuca Writes on any platform. I'm most active on Threads actually. I found Threads to actually be pretty good because then you could actually like just interface with other people.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way of showing yourself. So,
Yeah.
um, even people like I've just chatted with naturally just kind of creep onto my profile and be like, oh wow, you author, cool.
You're
Like
right.
we were just talking about like anime or something, it's
Yeah.
just the natural thing. Um yeah, so Threads I'm most active on, Instagram, those are kind of the two that I'm focusing on more. Uh I did I did just hop onto the Xiaohongshu train, the red note as the Americans like to call it.
Nice.
Uh I didn't I haven't really set up everything there, but I definitely want to start communicating with like the Chinese audience a little bit more too.
Nice.
Because I think they're important for me as well, because like I am telling the story of their history. It's important to me that I tell it authentically.
Yeah.
I do a lot of research, but there's probably still some stuff I got wrong.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Um, as for just, aspiring authors, just write. Just write.
Yeah. That's what it comes down to.
That's there's you could think so much to where like an old manager of mine always used to say, you get analysis paralysis. Just stop. Just go. Do it. Do it. Let your instincts run. Um, the first product is probably not going to be good. It's okay.
Yeah.
The whole point is that you do it. It can only get better if you do it.
Yeah.
If you don't, it's just going to stay the same. It's going to be non-existent. Um, so you just have to, you can't really take yourself too seriously either because like again, there are those times where I write something I'm like, oh, that was garbage. All right, let's go. Come on, move on.
Yeah.
But it's you kind of have to have fun with it a little bit. Um, now, if you don't mind, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Who was your favorite character of the book, or what was your favorite plot point of the book, arc, scene, whatever? What did you enjoy most?
No, I mean, I don't necessarily have like a favorite character. What I enjoyed was mainly the plot, how it was developed,
Hmm.
because it brought out your creativity. Like that's what I appreciate the most, like how you create a plot and how it basically invite the reader, not just me, I would say, but the reader in general, to actually dive into the book
Mhm.
and feel like, okay, you're part of it. Don't get me wrong, like I don't hate the main character. I just think I'm like, man, like, come on, you gotta be. I mean, at the end of the day, you also want good to prevail over evil. So I admire the main character resilience, even though I think that sometimes you gotta be a little, you gotta show some little evil, to get over your enemies. But uh, I do admire his intentions because he did really want to do good. But I think his Achilles heel uh was his idealism, and so I would say that is the main character is I can't pronounce his name for some reason, but the main character is enigmatic. He's an enigmatic. At the end of the day, he's still a mystery. He's enigmatic because on the one hand, um, he's idealistic and he's someone that you can sort of get rid of, but at the same time, you still have to root for him because what he's doing, like what he's fighting for, is admirable. Like because you want something better. Like why would you root for something that would make the world like a bad place? So that's why I would say that the main character is I would say it's my favorite, but he's definitely um the best in the entire book for sure. Sure. And I,
Got you.
I always like characters also who are more calculating, but the main character deserves his spotlight.
Mhm. Nice.
Now, honestly, Christian, you did a great work here. Keep getting creative because this book right here, it's a masterpiece. It's really a masterpiece. It's very well written. It's very good. And I'm looking forward for book two. I would assume it will come out what next year or maybe at the
Uh,
end of this year.
yeah, I'm not so sure. Obviously, we had conversations below that. I just started school again.
Yeah,
So there's that. I'm also very, very happy that next month will be the first time I will ever be going to China.
there you
Um,
go.
so
Oh boy, that will
now I could
fill
get
you. Oh boy.
yes. So there's also kind of that. I'm like, all right, let me experience the culture for
Yeah.
myself. And I'm sure that will make my writing just 10 times better.
If you could move to China, would you?
I love it here. I've lived in the same house since my whole entire life.
Okay,
Um, yeah, it's kind of hard to leave home. Home is home.
that's true.
Uh, but I mean, maybe a house in China or something.
I mean, hey, especially in a place like Hong Kong, which is still fundamentally Anglo-Saxon, so
hmm
which is good. So it's tied to, the UK, the US, culturally speaking. Yeah, I mean, it's no, but I think you're gonna have fun in China, like especially that you pretty much commit your intellectual life to Chinese history.
Yeah.
So the least,
The main goal of that is just I just want to share an appreciation for Chinese history and culture to the West because I think it's as we spoke about on the last episode that I was on, um, China is a misunderstood nation in many respects.
Mhm.
So I just want people to see, I want the Western people to see the Chinese people and to understand that, um, as the Last Jinyiwei is about human resilience, there's nothing more resilient than the Chinese people.
Yeah,
For
that's very true. They're very,
thousands of years, they have constantly been at the brunt of violence,
yeah,
on and off. So, it's really impressive to me that just despite that, their culture is still so strong. And I
yeah.
think that's the reason why they're so resilient. Their culture is so strong, their traditions are so strong. Um, and you can't easily destroy that. So, and just in general, there's just so many interesting stories to tell and I want to be the one to tell them to the West. So
Absolutely. Well, Christian, thank you. Thank you for coming on the GGV Publishing Podcast. And I will link the two books at the end of the day, the Last Jinyiwei and the Little Red Book, so that people can check your first book and why it deserves the award that it won. So that's always important. And yeah, thank you.
thank you. Always nice to have a conversation with you.
Absolutely.